Hi, Martin.
Hi, Anand.
Great to see you today.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well.
So today my guest is Martin Schmidt. He's full professor for nonlinear optimization at Trier University since 2019. His research interests are mixed integer nonlinear and bilevel optimization, as well as general equilibrium problems. He develops novel algorithms for solving these problems for real-world and large-scale instances, mainly from the energy sector. Martin is editorial board member of the Journal of Optimization Theory and Applications, Optimization Letters, Euro Journal on Computational Optimization, or Spectrum, and is technical editor for Mathematical Programming Computation. He wrote more than 85 articles that have been published in prestigious journals including Mathematical Programming A, B, and C, SIAM Journal on Optimization, Operations Research, and Informs Journal on Computing. Moreover, together with colleagues, he received several Best Paper Awards from different journals such as Euro Journal on Computational Optimization, Mathematical Methods of Operations Research, and Optimization and Engineering. He also won the Euro Excellence in Practice Award in 2016. Besides these scientific aspects, he's a passionate baker and photographer. Martin, thank you so much for accepting the invitation. I'm really happy that you're here. So how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I have to say that I have to thank you for the invitation. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm very much looking forward for our chat.
That's my pleasure. It's an honor. So tell me, where are you originally from? Do you come from East or West Germany?
I was born in West Germany in '83. So this was at the time where Germany still was split into two parts. And I was born in Gifhorn. I'm pretty sure that nobody will know this place, but maybe some people know Hanover. It's in the northern part of Germany, so it's rather close to Hanover, where I was born and where I grew up.
Right. So you were born the same year that I was born, in 1983. At that time, the Cold War was approaching its end, which happened in 1989 with the fall of the Berlin Wall. Do you have any recollections from that period?
To be honest, not really. I mean, I know the history from books and from my school education and so on, but I mean, when the Berlin Wall came down, I was 6 years old, and I have no real memories about the political situation during that time or before. So my political interest came up later. Yeah.
Right. Tell me about your parents' occupation.
Yeah, I mean, my father was a policeman, and my mother worked in a kindergarten before I was born. So when I was born, my mother stopped working. I have an older sister, and she decided to, well, now they are two of them at home, so I have to take care of them. So a very classic German family at that time. The father, as a policeman, was working, and my mother took care of us, and did all the stuff at home, I would say.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Did your dad experience any issue because he was a policeman and there was the Cold War at that time?
Not really seriously, but in the 80s and late 80s, it was also possible to visit relatives in the eastern part of Germany. And usually you just crossed the border. Of course, you had maybe some very brief interview at the border. Okay, where do you want to go? What is the reason, etc. And then you usually said, I guess, well, you just want to visit some relatives. But due to him being a policeman, I remember some stories that he told from time to time that he had he had to go out of the car and had some more serious interviews. And I remember him telling us that the main strategy of these people first were to just let him wait a long time sitting alone in this room for the interview. Maybe so that he is getting more and more nervous I don't know. So I was not part of the situation. I only know these things because my parents told these stories from time to time. But in the end, there was never a serious problem, I guess. At least not as far as I know from the stories.
Right. So Martin, you seem to be a person of multiple interests. What were you up to in your early years?
Sports. So I was very much into sports. Like I guess almost every child at that time, at least every boy at that time in Germany, I played soccer, of course. So when I was 7, it was this magic world championship in Italy where Germany won the world championship in Rome.
Against Argentina.
Against Argentina, there was this goal by Andreas Bremer, I guess, in the 86th minute.
Penalty kick.
A penalty, exactly. Yeah. And of course, all these football or soccer players that have been part of the World Championship in 1990, they have been my early heroes at that time, like Lothar Matthäus, Rudi Völler, Thomas Hessler, etc. Yeah, all these famous players. Yeah.
Yeah, Jürgen Klinsmann.
Yeah, of course, Jürgen Klinsmann as well.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember that team because Brazil was out early in that World Cup, and as I was telling Marco Lübecker about my interest in the German squad from 1990s, because probably I don't know if it was their jersey or something that just caught my attention, and I was a German supporter for the next year or two, and then Brazil started winning again probably, and then I switched back.
I see.
But then I'm quite familiar with many players because they even played later on in 1994. So
yes.
Yeah. Did you play any other sports?
Yes, I mean, I in my very early years it was about soccer, but then I started to seriously play tennis and especially table tennis. So I stopped playing soccer rather early. I don't know exactly the time or how old I was, but then I very much focused on tennis and table tennis. So also tennis at that time, there have been some very famous German tennis stars like Steffi Graf, Boris Becker, Michael Stich, and so on. So they have been my heroes at the same time as well. But I became pretty good in tennis and table tennis. So my trainer said, okay, you have to focus on one. Both at the same time will not work because you have to train a lot and you cannot do both. And so I had to decide, and I don't know exactly why this was the case, but I decided for table tennis. Not sure why. I cannot tell. And then I had, during my, let's say, from 10 years on to 20 years on, I had a, let's say, semi-professional table tennis career.
Wow.
So, I played a lot of table tennis. I was in the German ranking top 10 at my age and so on. So, but it's a long time ago. I mean, today I'm a very bad player.
That's very, very impressive. And why did you stop?
Due to health issues. I had a lot of problems with my muscles and with my bones at that time. So it seemed to be the case as if my body was not made for real professional sports. And I guess it was at the age of 20, 21. I was playing third league at that year and we won the championship. So we got up to second league at that time. And this would have meant that I would have to train a lot more again, and at that point already it was clear that my body was at its limit. And at that point I decided to stop, but I stayed with table tennis, and I was working a lot as a trainer in Hanover, where I studied also at that time at the Olympic Center there of the federal state of Lower Saxony, and there we also had an internat where younger players also had training before they got to school, and then when they came back after school, they had their second training at that day. And then I worked with them as a trainer, and I was even more successful as a trainer than as a player on my own. So maybe the passive part was better suited for me than the more active one. Yeah.
That's very interesting. I could not see that coming. Very.
Yeah, I do not talk about it a lot anymore, but so maybe not a lot of people know about it. So now they know it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very glad that you shared this nice side of yours from the past. And what about music and literature?
So when I was 10 years old, I started listening to music a lot. So again, it is more on the passive side. I'm not able to play any instrument. I tried to learn guitar, but it's hopeless. My talent is too low for this. And but already I said guitar, so already at 10 years, 11 years old, I started to listen to bands like Nirvana, Rage Against the Machine, Pearl Jam, and so on. So these grunge or crossover heroes at that time. So all of my friends at school, they were more into Take That, and
really?
Backstreet Boys, and so on. And I was already into harder music. At that time, it started with grunge, like Nirvana, of course. This was very.
And what
important.
about German rock bands like Scorpions and Rammstein?
Yeah, I liked Rammstein a lot. They have a new album out now this year. I didn't find the time yet to really go into it. But in the early years, I liked them a lot. Scorpions, well, they are from Hannover, where I studied and made my PhD. But to be honest, they are a bit too, officially you would classify it as rock, but I would say rather poppy rock. So maybe it's a bit too poppy.
Yeah, they have a lot of ballads, and that makes one a bit, I know.
Yeah. But of course, there's this one song, Wind of Change, that every German citizen knows, because it was kind of the soundtrack of when the Berlin Wall came down. And of course, this is a great rock or pop song, I'm not sure. But it's a great song, but if you would ask me for another song of them, I wouldn't pass.
Okay, yeah, Wind of Change is one of my all-time favorites for sure. I really like that song, and I was, of course, the same age as you were when the song came out. So in the early, I know it came in 1989 or so, 1990 probably. Yeah. But then I was familiar when it came out. It was a massive hit, right? So
yeah, sure.
Yeah, so right. And I asked about literature. If you also
in my early years when I focused more on sports. I was not interested in books at all. I couldn't understand how people in my age could read books. I wanted to play soccer or tennis or table tennis. But later on in school, during my last years in school, I also had a major in German literature, and I got very much interested in that. And especially during my study years, when I studied mathematics in Hannover, I read a lot. And then, most likely influenced by my last school years, I was also very much into the classic things like Goethe or Schiller and so on. But not that much anymore. It's more on different things that I read right now. But back at that time, I liked Kafka a lot. I read a lot about Kafka. There is a German writer, Martin Walser. I'm not sure whether he's really known outside of Germany, but in Germany he's a very important writer. So I like him a lot. And if he has a new book, I still also read his new stuff. But he's very old right now. I don't know how much there will be in the future from him. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Kafka, of course, is very famous worldwide. He's not a German author, but the Process, books like that is. I read it myself.
I love it.
Yeah,
I read it. The Process. I read it again and again.
It's a bit painful to literally follow the process, but it's a great book, and they even made movies out of it. At least a pair of them. Yeah, and they're nice.
But in my opinion, it's hard to make movies out of Kafka books because what's so special, at least in my humble opinion, about Kafka is that he creates this very strange atmosphere. I mean, at least in Germany, there is this word Kafkaesque, that you say something is like Kafka if it's a strange situation that you don't understand and it feels kind of surreal for you. And to put this into a movie is I think very hard. So I prefer the books when it comes to Kafka.
All right. Yeah, we in Portuguese we also say Kafkiano or Kafkiana, depending on the situation. Yeah. We also have that. Yeah. And it seems that you also developed some acting skills during your youth.
Yes. When I was in school, I was acting for theater. Yeah. And a bit also after school, but mainly during school. And my favorite one was, so we had The Bold Soprano. I don't know how known this is. It's by Eugene Ionesco. And it was the birth of the theater of the absurd. So other classic plays are like Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett and so on. But this is absurd because it's so boring. The Bold Soprano really is crazy. It has no sense at all. It's completely weird conversations and so on. And it was a lot of fun acting in this theater play. Yeah.
Yeah. And how does involvement with several disciplines help you later in your professional career?
Oof, that's a good question. I mean, I guess one thing that I really learned during my, let's say, semi-professional years in sports is to manage scarce time. This is something that I benefit a lot right now, I guess, because time is a very scarce good in my professional life right now. But at that time it was, I mean, of course, I went to school, I came back from school, I had to do some homework, but I don't have a lot of time for it because then I had to go to the training, and it was not where we lived. It was in Hanover, although we lived more near Brunswick in a rural area there. So it was something like a 1 hour drive to the training and 1 hour drive back from training. So it was the best players in this age of Lower Saxony, which is a federal state in Germany. There we all trained and practiced together. So scarce time was already something that I experienced at that age already, and I think it was a good experience in the sense that I learned to manage this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Maybe this helps me. I don't know whether this really helps me right now. I mean, you never really know where it comes from that you can do something maybe in a good way or in a not so good way. Maybe this is the reason. I think it's not. I think it's likely that it comes from that time. Yeah.
Right. What about school? Did you used to get good grades?
No. The short answer is no. At least not at the beginning. So when I was in my 7th, 8th, 9th year, I was very bad at school. So sports was more important for me. I was also a bit into this punk stuff all the time. So rebellion was something that I liked a lot at that age. So of course, rebellion against school teachers was very high on my list. Not school itself, but rebellion against it. And I was very bad at that time. I even was short before the situation that I had to repeat 1 year in school. And in fact, it was due to my math grades at that point.
Really?
So it was, yes. It was really like I was very, very bad in math at that time. I had a very bad teacher in my 7th and 8th year. So it was very painful, the math lectures at that time. Not for me, but I don't think that she liked me. Maybe it was, we both more hated each other than we loved each other, I can say this. And I mean, then you, of course, also do not fell in love with the subject. And at that point, math was really horror for me. Yeah.
Right. But then your interest in math evolved up to the point of choosing that subject as a degree.
Yes, I mean, I got a new main teacher then in school, and he was also my math teacher. And he kind of realized that I was not completely free of talent, but I was just missing the basics from year 7, year 8, and so on. So he organized another school kid from that time, of course older than me, and he helped me a lot. So I had some private lessons there, and he helped me a lot. So I learned the basics again that I missed the years before, and from that point on I really liked it. And in the end I was very good in math. So when I made my Abitur, so the final exams before leaving school, I was very good in math. But it was a development. It was rather steep in the end, but my first performances in math, no, not good.
Wow, I'm surprised to learn about that, and I mean, it's a matter of motivation apparently. I mean, in your case.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and this is something that also guides me right now in my teaching. Maybe we come to this point later on when it's more about university, etc. But I think if you want to motivate people to fall in love with a subject, they don't have to fall in love with you as well as a teacher. I mean, that would be too much, of course. But if they like you, if they think you're a nice guy and you can explain things nicely, and that you get in contact with them on also another level besides mathematics, I'm very much convinced that this helps as well. And maybe this is another lesson from that time that I learned and that I try to put into my day-to-day life at the university right now.
Yeah, I've seen in your CV, to my surprise again, that your first publications were in cryptography.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, when I started studying math, but when I started studying math, I was not so much into optimization. In fact, I guess I only had one lecture on optimization at all during my studies before I started my PhD. I was more into algebra, algebraic geometry, number theory, and so on. So when I started to think about, okay, what should be the topic of my diploma thesis, so what today would be the master's thesis, I started to think about, well, it should be something pure, like number theory and so on. But at that time, I liked coding a lot. I still like coding a lot, but I don't have enough time to really code a lot. But I did it a lot at that time. So I tried to find something in order to combine some pure math stuff and coding. And well, this combination then led to a diploma thesis in the field of cryptography, where we studied some deeper theorems from Diophantine approximation. So where you try to approximate irrational numbers with rationals with bounded denominators. I mean, if the denominator can be arbitrarily large, you can always get as close as you want to an irrational number. So with bounded denominators, and you can do this simultaneously, so then it's like multidimensional, and you can introduce some inhomogeneities and so on. So this is the deeper stuff in Diophantine approximation. Yeah, and I was able to set up a cryptographic scheme. It was a bit commitment scheme and a symmetric cipher at that time. So yeah, this was my diploma thesis, and luckily we have been able to make a paper out of it, one or two. So this is why the early publications are on cryptography. I'm not connected to this field anymore.
Okay, and when did optimization enter your life?
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting because, as I said, I was not into contact with optimization during my studies, except for one very basic class like gradient method, Newton's method, so the very, very basics. And then at that time, I wanted to start a PhD, do my PhD. And at that time, I was still married, so I'm now divorced, but at that time I was married, and my wife at that time was 5 years younger. So she just started to study in Hanover. And this is why I didn't want to leave that place. So I was looking for PhD positions in Hanover, and in pure math, at that point, I already thought, well, do you really want to do it? Maybe not. So I asked some professors from the applied mathematics department at that time. In the end, I asked one from partial differential equations. So I was more into PDEs than into optimization during my studies. So I asked him, and he said, well, no, you're a good student. I would like to hire you, but I have no vacant position right now. So, but there's this guy from optimization, this professor from optimization, and I know he got this large industrial project. It's a huge one, and he has for sure a free position. Ask him. And I said, well, okay, optimization. I'm not really well educated in optimization. But so I Googled a bit when I came home, and I said, oh, it's about algorithms and so on. Of course, I knew a bit. So I thought, okay, maybe this is, again, a good combination of mathematics and coding and algorithms and so on, what I liked a lot at that time. So I went to him, and we had a chat, and it was nice. And in the end, he just hired me, although I was not an expert in optimization at that point. He said, well, you're good at coding. You can learn optimization, but learning, if you're being talented in coding maybe is something, it's better that you already have it inside of yourself. Optimization you can learn on your own. So it was a bit like this.
Okay, so it was by chance that you ended
more
up
or
in
less,
optimization.
Yeah. More than less. Yes.
and what were the main contributions of your PhD thesis?
Oh, I don't know whether my PhD thesis is a very good one. It was about gas transport. So this large industrial project at that time was about how to control a gas network so that all the contracts of the supplying and withdrawing customers are satisfied, keeping the pressure levels and so on. And this is a super huge mixed integer, nonlinear, non-convex optimization problem, because you have the discrete controls on, do you activate a compressor station or not? Do you close or open a valve or not? And on the other hand, you have the physics that describe the gas flow through the pipes. And this is highly nonlinear and non-convex. So although I had no real idea about optimization, I directly went into mixed integer, nonlinear, non-convex optimization, again, by chance. It was not my wish, it was just the topic.
So you were true to the lions, basically.
Yes, yeah. And then, I mean, it was about, in the end, it was about an interior point method for some special non-smooth constraints motivated by the application, and also complementarity constraints. And I developed an interior point tailored for these problems. And I mean, complementarity constraints, KKT conditions, equilibrium models, this still is part of my day-to-day life right now, although I would not go to an interior point session anymore in an optimization conference right now, I would say.
Right. Yeah, sounds very complicated. Yeah.
Yeah, a bit. I mean, if you do it on your own, you get familiar with these things, and then in the end you think, oh, is this enough for a PhD? I'm not sure, but I mean, viewed from outside, it's always something different.
Yeah. Sure. Usually the journey to obtain a PhD degree is made up of highs and lows. How was it in your case?
Well, like for everybody else as well, with highs and lows, of course. It was interesting for me on the one hand, because I learned a lot. I very much like working in applied optimization still, because I mean, at that time I learned about mixed integer optimization. I was a bit more into nonlinear optimization. So I saw a binary variable for the first time in my life. I learned about branch and bound, cutting planes, and so on. So this was very interesting. But at the same time, I learned about what are the market rules of trading gas in Europe. What about the physics of gas transport? How do the engineers control these networks? And this is something that I like a lot in applied optimization, because you have to learn about the field of application all the time. Otherwise, you're not able to solve their problems, right? And so this was interesting, but I mean, you have these weeks and months where you think, okay, all your ideas are bullshit and crap, and you have to throw away everything. And I also remember, it's a big story right now again in Germany, that I had something like 10 or 11 contracts. So my shortest one, I guess, was about 1 month. It's not allowed anymore, I guess, in Germany. But we have these very short contracts with very bad payment here in Germany in our scientific system, in the academic system. And at that point, it was also for me the case, although I have to say, I always trusted my PhD supervisor, Mark Steinbach. He said, well, this will work out, but I shift you from that bank account to that bank account, but this is only enough for 1 more month, so you get another working contract. I was trusting him a lot, and it worked out perfectly in the end. But we right now in Germany have the same discussion again, or we have it still, that we lose a lot of highly talented researchers, young researchers, because they say, well, I can go to a different company, they pay me better, I almost get instantaneously to a permanent contract. Why the hell should I stay in academia, right? And we have to keep these talented people in our community, in our field. So something has to change there. And it was, for me, already the case as well.
Yeah, talking about uncertainty,
worked out fine.
Having multiple contracts over a PhD period is a bit stressful, I think.
Yeah, but I was trusting him a lot. So I did not have too many sleepless nights at that point. But of course, I mean, at that point, I was not married. I didn't plan to have a family or buy a house or get children or something like this. And of course, if you plan to do something like that, the overall story changes drastically. Because then, I mean, if you plan to have a newborn child and you only have 1 month working contract and then another 1 or 2 months, so you never feel comfortable with the situation, and you are not comfortable with the situation because, well, then there is another being in your life that you have the responsibility for, and then the entire story changes. This was not the case for me, so it was kind of fine for me. But of course, we do not need to take or keep the most talented people, but also the most talented people that at the same time want to build up a family, right? So this has to change. It's a very bad situation in Germany right now.
So you finished your PhD, and after a 1-year period doing postdoc, you found a junior professor position relatively fast. How did that happen?
I was lucky. No, I mean, I think it was, but this is being lucky. It was the right position at the right time. It was a junior professor position entitled Optimization of Energy Systems. So I had this background of gas transport, optimization, and so on. And the university in Erlangen and Nürnberg, where this junior professorship position was, this working group of Alexander Martin was also a working group in this large industrial project that I made my PhD in. So I already had the right network to connect to these people. I don't want to say that this is the overall reason why I got the position, but it would be a lie saying that this is completely unimportant as well. I mean, it of course plays a significant role. So yeah, after 1 year of postdocs back in Hannover, still in Hannover, I then moved to this junior professorship position. And that's another problem in Germany and overall in the entire world, I guess, that scientific careers are not really well plannable. So it's always a bit about luck, and I had this luck.
Yeah. And how did you get involved with bilevel optimization?
Well, during that time in Erlangen and Nürnberg, I had this junior professor position, and we had what was called the Energy Campus Nürnberg. So it was an interdisciplinary think tank constructed or built by some professors of the universities or of the University of the Applied Sciences and so on. And under this umbrella, I came into contact with Veronika Grimm and Gregor Zöttl. They are both still in Nuremberg, and they are economists. And Veronika at that time said, well, you did something about complementarity constraint. This is about equilibrium. This is what we do. We have to come into contact. So we met and we discussed, and we liked each other right away. So it was clear that there will be some collaboration, a joint paper project, etc. So they explained me their problems that they wanted to solve, but they didn't have the algorithmic background to develop tailored algorithms to really solve these problems. And they explained them to me, and then I said, well, what's that? There is an optimization problem in an optimization problem. That's not good, I guess. At that point, I had no idea. So it was really about the application from economics of market modeling, energy market design questions. And then I said, well, I like the application. I think this is really relevant right now in Germany and in Europe. And it's mathematically challenging, so maybe I should go to the library and get a book. And then I got the first book, or it's the famous Dempe book, Foundations of Bilevel Programming or something like this. And I read it, and this is how I came into contact. First, by the application with the economists that I worked with. I am still working with them, although I moved to a different university. And then I realized more and more that bilevel optimization on its own is a very interesting topic. So today there are not only papers on applied bilevel optimization, but also on the, let's say, the foundations or algorithms for bilevel optimization. So I fell in love with this field a bit, and the reason is because the economist showed it to me.
Right. So I had the chance to have a very nice conversation with Martin Labbé and Luce Brodkorn, and they spoke about their research and views on bilevel optimization problems. In your case, how do you usually approach this class of problems?
Well, it's kind of similar to what Martin and Luce do. I work a lot with Martin. It's a pleasure to work with Martin Labbé. So whenever we finish a paper, I'm directly asking what's the next one. Not because I'm so into paper writing. I like paper writing as well, but working with Martin it's a joy, really. But at least when they started to work on bilevel optimization, when I read their papers, it's more that they had a combinatorial optimization problem on the lower level, like they studied these network toll pricing problems, where in the lower level you have a combinatorial problem, like the shortest path problem that every guy that wants to traverse this network needs to solve somehow. And they liked, of course, because they originally are from this field, combinatorial optimization, to exploit the combinatorial structure of it. In my case, it's more about that the lower level problem is economically motivated. It's a trading model. It's an equilibrium problem for a market and so on. And if you write this down originally, you see that this is again a Nash equilibrium on the lower level problem. And a Nash equilibrium problem is something very, very complicated. It has something non-convex inside. And of course, if you have non-convexities in in the lower level of a bilevel optimization problem,
it's a nightmare.
My team would say you're in the potato, yeah? So you have a problem, right?
Yeah.
At the beginning, I said, what is that phrase about? So it means you have a problem, right? And what we usually do, we cheat, yeah? I mean, we reformulate the problem. We in the applied field, we kind of make the right economic assumptions so that the equilibrium outcome is something that is central planner would get as well. So then you are back to optimization and bilevel, in the sense that you have optimization in the lower level. You can take KKTs, you can do branch and bound on complementarity constraints, and that's what I like about it. Yeah.
Wow. Again, it sounds, whenever you mention mixed integer nonlinear optimization and non-convexity, it gives me a bit of a I get scared, honestly.
No reason for that.
Yeah, but so Martin, what do you consider promising avenues of research regarding this topic, and not only methodologically speaking, but also in terms of practical applications, for example, in the energy sector?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I start with the applications. I guess it's very important it's important to not make the cheating assumptions that I usually do. Let's put it like this. So, I mean, since bilevel optimization is such a hard optimization problem, we have to make assumptions to simplify the problem. Otherwise, we cannot do anything. But of course, with every assumption, the distance to reality gets larger and larger. And of course, when it comes to, do some consulting for politicians, what is the right energy system, what is the right trading system, what is the right market design, etc., you should be as close as possible to the application, to reality, right? And so, like having non-convex problems in the lower level, equilibrium problems, Nash equilibrium problems in the lower level, this is something that I find very interesting from the application point of view, but this directly leads to interesting mathematical questions, because you have to develop new theory about it. You have to develop new algorithms. So it's an entire field that is rather open still if you have equilibrium problems in the lower level, non-convexities in the lower level. And what I find more and more interesting, and I started to work with some of my colleagues on these topics, is we still believe in rationality a lot in optimization. We still believe, when we do our modeling, that people are rational in the sense that they solve an optimization problem to global optimality knowing all the data. Well, that's of course a joke. Nobody is doing this in reality, right? I mean, this is in economics, they call it the field of bounded rationality. It's nothing new. But when it comes to bilevel optimization, in mathematical optimization, I think we have to introduce these concepts more and more, just in order to get closer to reality again. Because, I mean, if I take a decision, if I later on go to the supermarket and I buy something to drink, I'm not doing a global optimization contest and solve the problem to global optimality. I just heuristically choose a beer or whatever, right? Although maybe orange juice would be the global optimal solution. So going into this bounded rationality direction, also in bilevel optimization, is a very promising avenue, both for theory as well as for getting closer to reality, getting better and better in the applications that we want to solve.
Okay, yeah, I think I got the message. And in your opinion, what is the appropriate background that one should have to start working on bilevel optimization?
That's a good question, and that's a bit of a problem for bilevel optimization. Maybe it's not a problem, but I mean, it's challenging. And for students, also for PhD students who start to work in this field, it's challenging because you need to know stuff from different fields of optimization. So, for instance, I mean, the classic technique is take the lower level, write down the KKT condition, check whether some reasonable constraint qualifications hold so that your KKT theorem really can be applied. This is nonlinear optimization, right? So you need some background in nonlinear optimization. On the other hand, you do big M reformulations using binary variables. You have like indicator constraints. You can do branch and bound on them. This usually leads to weak algorithms. You need cutting planes, and all the stuff that I just mentioned is more, it has nothing to do with nonlinear optimization or continuous optimization. It's from discrete optimization, combinatorial optimization like this. So I think you need knowledge from both of these fields. And usually, at least in Germany, or at least with my students, they either have a focus on nonlinear and continuous optimization, or they have a focus on discrete, branch and bound, cutting planes, valid inequalities, etc. So usually when I get students that I work with or that I start to work with in bilevel optimization, they are good in one subject, and then they have to learn about the other one, so that they then can really do good things for or in the field of bilevel optimization.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough subject, but it has been increasingly studied by many people all over the world. So it sounds really interesting. So as we've been discussing, it is clear that you like studying mixed integer nonlinear optimization problems with non-convex functions. One might consider this area an inhospitable terrain because of all the challenges involved. For example, the numerical errors, or even the notion of optimality and so on. I wonder, how do you convince practitioners that your solution is actually good?
That's tough. I mean, this reminds me, back in my PhD days, when I mentioned this industrial project, we exactly had this problem. So I have this non-convex MINLP here, I have a solution. And of course, as a PhD student, if you have X star, let's call it like this, you are very proud. Finally, after debugging, modeling, implementing, and so on, you got X star. And you go with X star to the practitioner, and usually the practitioner tells you, well, that's bullshit, right? I mean, you violate this constraint, this cannot be optimal because there is a millimeter more in the characteristic diagram of this turbo compressor or whatever. So this is always complicated, and it's much more complicated compared to convincing a practitioner that your mixed integer linear programs solution is optimal or feasible, because you do not have to deal with these epsilons and tolerances, etc., that are introduced by the non-convexities. You have to do spatial branching. You never get a feasible solution usually. You get an epsilon feasible solution. How do you choose epsilon? Is it a good epsilon for the application or not? And then if you go back to the practitioners with your optimal solution, or what you at least think of is an optimal solution, you have to convince them. And usually your solution has infeasibilities. That's unavoidable in non-convex optimization, some kind of. It's about tolerances. And it was a big pain in the ass for me because I was not experienced with that. And I had to learn it just by trial and error. But to answer your question, what we did is you have to compare a bit of, let's say, to reality. And the reality of this industrial company was their simulation tool. That was it was for them a reasonable proxy for reality.
Right.
So they had a lot of experience with their simulation tool. So what I did is, or what we did, I did not do all the work on my own, we implemented converters putting our controls out of the solution and our physical solution into the input of the simulation tool. Then we ran the simulation tool, and hopefully we could say, look, it works. So it was their reality check. And of course, when it's about simulations and non-convexities, you also have tolerances, but they are maybe of a different nature. The simulation tool is doing something different. So you really have to go to the practitioner and see what does she or he really wants to see. What is the convincing argument? And then you have to do it. Because if you say, well, you seem to have no clue about epsilon, delta, optimality, and global optimization, I cannot talk to you. This is a mathematical standpoint, but it will not help for the practitioners and for the applied project that you want to be a success in the end. So you have to go to the practitioner and you have to do it their way. Otherwise, you have no chance. But that's a tough job.
I see what you mean.
And it's not it's not something that you usually can write a paper about.
Yeah. Right. Solving these optimization problems alone is already a huge challenge. And then you have to find ways to convince a practitioner that is worth using it in practice is, again, another challenge. So the road is full of, challenges. And sometimes it can be really tricky to work out a feasible solution.
Sure. But I guess we have simply to go this way. I mean, I was not doing optimization. I wasn't even not born at that time. But I guess that mixed integer linear optimization went kind of the same way. In the beginning, people had to convince other people that this is cool stuff that people really can use in practice. And I guess in the beginning, there have been skeptical people and they have been convinced. And we have to do this now for a new model class because it's required to model the problems as such. And we have to go the same way, I guess, going to the practitioners. The story is not new, I guess, but it's tougher. The road that you go is a bit harder.
Yeah, for sure. And how about in academia? Have you faced any issues when it comes to publishing papers in this area?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I have to say, when you combine worlds like mixed integer programming and nonlinear optimization, or even if you want to combine mixed integer discrete stuff with differential equations, it's very hard to publish papers because you got a reviewer usually from this field or from that field. But what do you have to do if you want to combine these things? You will not be propelling the state of the art only in this field and only in this field. You have to make, again, assumptions to get to a marriage of these two fields. And this then is something new, mathematically new in optimization. But if you have a discrete reviewer, he tells you or she tells you, well, from a discrete point of view, this is all not so interesting. And you get the same answer from the PDE guy. And it's not always the case that people really understand that connecting these worlds propel the field as well, although it does not propel this separate field standalone or this separate field standalone. So this is hard, but I mean, we talked about non-convexities. I just wrote a paper on bilevel optimization with non-convexities in a lower level where we where we proved by example, by a nasty counterexample, that this is computationally impossible to solve. We got rejected right away. And one of the arguments, for instance, was, well, this is all known, linear optimization problems can also behave very ill-posed on a computer and so on. That's not false, that's true. But the story simply is completely different if you go to nonlinear non-convexities. You got completely different behavior. You get no error bones anymore if you have a very strangely posed problem. So also in academia, I think there is a way to go to convince everybody that non-convexities are not the same as linear programming. Although linear programming can behave numerically unstable as well, we all know it, but it's a different story and it's much more complicated and it's much worse, the situation, if you really have non-convexities. And I think we have to convince a lot of people from practice and also still some people from academia as well. And
these revisions are, polite or soft, or they can be sometimes a bit, strong.
I don't want to talk about this specific paper revision because I don't want to attack people here. But more generally speaking, I'm often a bit pissed, to have a clear word, when I read reviews. And the reason is that very many reviews that we get from time to time are very harsh. They are not very polite. And I mean, I talked a few minutes ago already about these highly talented young people that we have to keep in our field because they are our future, kind of. And writing harsh reviews is not a good idea when it comes to this. I mean, it's not about me. I mean, my ego is large enough. I can stand an impolite review. I have published enough papers to know for myself that not all that I do is completely crap. So my ego is large enough. But if you start working as a PhD in this field, your ego is not like this. You're not convinced that everything is great what you do. You're struggling with what you do. You ask yourself, is this good enough? Is this the right topic? Am I good enough? Am I smart enough to do a PhD? Am I good enough to stay in academia afterward in order to do an academic career, getting a professor or whatever? And we should keep these people. We should motivate them. We need them. And writing bad reviews or harsh reviews, impolite reviews, is the worst thing that we can do. Because, I mean, we all know this situation. You start and you get a bad review. You think you're an idiot. Mm-hmm. You think you are stupid. You think you are not good enough. You think you should directly move on to something else. And this is the worst situation that can be the result out of a review. So mm-hmm. This is like out to the community, write polite and constructive reviews. It's not that hard. It takes some time, but you have been young as well, and think back.
Yeah, absolutely. Reviewers can be unnecessarily harsh or even rude at times, and that can not only negatively affect the students' motivation, but also it might set a bad example as the students themselves can repeat the same mistake in the future, thinking that this is the proper way of writing reports.
Yeah, they learn it. I mean, it's like, okay, this is how it goes, so I will do it. I will get an asshole as well. And that's, of course, something that we should avoid, We shouldn't get assholes or become assholes. I mean, it's about our field. We want to propel this field. And even if we think that, well, look, guy, you submitted this paper to math programming. It's not enough, okay? The contribution is not big enough, but you can all write this down in a way that maybe is even motivating for people to just send it to a journal that is one league below. I mean, this is not the end of the life.
Exactly.
You can do this in a good way or in a bad way. And we should teach our young researchers on how to write good reviews by writing good reviews and polite reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Respectful ones.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about guidance, and at that point in your career, who were the most influential people?
Of course, one of the influential people in a career is always the PhD supervisor. It was Mark Steinbach for me. But to be honest, I would say the most important mentor in my life was Alexander Martin. So I worked in his working group when I started to work in Erlangen-Nürnberg, when I got this junior professorship position. And on the one hand, he really gave me all the freedom to choose my topics, to choose my collaborations, to do whatever I want, to do the teaching that I want to do. And at the same time, there was always an open door. I could always approach him and ask, Alex, how would you do this? I have this collaboration, it's a bit strange, and now with this co-authorship. And I mean, we all know these nasty situations that you first have to learn. How do you deal with them, right? And if you start, you have no idea. And then it's always good to have someone you trust, of course, so that you can go with every problem to him or her and you get a polite answer, and it's kept a secret, so it's not just on Twitter the next minute. Look at this stupid junior professor, he doesn't know how this is managed. So, and Alex was perfect when it came to all these points. So also when it comes to how do you manage your group of PhD students, postdocs, other colleagues, and so on. In these, let's say, soft skills, I learned a lot by Alexander Martin. So I owe him a lot. So I think he was the most influential mentor that I had so far. And I mean, I will meet him next week again for 3 days. And most likely I will have again some questions like, Alex, how would you do this and that? I'm still approaching him. I mean,
he's like an oracle to you.
Yeah, it's. I don't know whether this will change, and I know that he will take the time, and we will have a discussion about this. And it's always nice, and he's a very relaxed one. He's never stressed, although his list of things is exploding every second. It's always a calm situation and so on. So it's really like a role model for me. Yeah.
Right. I think he'll be very happy to hear your comments about his influence in your work.
Yeah. But he deserves every good word. Yeah.
Eventually, you became a full professor. Did this happen earlier than you expected?
Yes. Much earlier. So I got my full professor position when I was 35. So this is very, very young. And I mentioned this main aspect already before. It again was about luck. I mean, I do not say that it's all about luck, right? I think I did my homework and I published some papers and gave some maybe not too bad talks. But it was again the right position at the right moment, and maybe I convinced the people here in Trier so that they thought, well, it seems to be a nice guy, so he also fits into the team and so on. And this is hard to plan, and you cannot control it, right? So I was very young at that point. I'm still rather young for such a position. I'm very grateful for that. I do not take this for granted. I never did take this for granted, but I know that it's not because I'm such a glorious and famous and incredibly smart math professor. It's a lot about luck and the people I worked with. I mean, I wrote quite some papers, but I wouldn't have written 2 or 3 or more than 2 or 3 of them without my colleagues. So I'm also very, very thankful for all of them, because all my co-authors, because without them, I would not have the position that I have now.
Yeah, you mentioned luck, but of course there's merit there. You have a very, very good CV. You've been publishing a lot, especially in the last couple of years. So probably it was a combination of both.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Talking about publications, I've noticed that researchers in general are becoming increasingly concerned about their Google Scholar profile.
Yes.
Some of them may even make the common mistake of directly comparing the number of citations or even the H-index of people that work in different fields.
Yes.
So take a guy from AI, machine learning, or even heuristics,
Yes.
and then you compare it with someone working integer programming and the theoretical things and so on. What is your opinion about this, and how do you mentor your students in this context?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, what you mentioned is kind of the curse of Google Scholar, I would say, because it allows people, especially younger people, to compare too much. I mean, comparison is not always a bad thing, to see where do you stand and so on. But if you do it too much, if this is your main objective, kind of, then this is a bad habit. You should be motivated by your field, not by your Google Scholar account. This is how I see it. And especially when it comes to comparing different fields. I mean, you mentioned, like, say, theoretical integer programming and machine learning. You simply cannot compare this. I mean, the numbers are in no relation at all, I would say.
Is that like apples and oranges in a way?
Yeah, you try to compare things that are not comparable.
Yep.
Okay, there is no metric that allows you to really compare these things. And what's even more dangerous, I would say, is the comparison that people do that are still very young. And then they say, oh, look at that guy, he has 6,000 citations and so on, or 600 maybe even, or 60, and you have 2 or 3 when you start. I mean, you start. And when it comes to age, I mean, of course, your counter, I mean, it's a monotonically increasing function, right?
Right.
So it will increase, but it's kind of intimidating maybe for young researchers, and they shouldn't look too much. Comparison is not bad, but if you compare too much, it's a bad thing. I mean, Google Scholar is great when it comes to scientific work, and if you want to find literature about whatever you want to find literature about. But it has its downsides as well, and these numbers and just comparing. I mean, in the end, we talk about people, right? And we shouldn't compare people just by numbers. I mean, that's not a good thing to do, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to my students, I do not really teach them with respect to this. I mean, I try to motivate them, so they should be motivated by their field. My idea is to motivate my students by that. In the end, they say, well, oh, this is cool. Oh, nonlinear optimization, this KKT theorem. Oh, with Farkas Lemma again. It was from linear optimization. Now again here. Now, woo, that's cool. And with bilevel optimization too. I want to. I mean, it's like I want to motivate the people by the field, by the subject, by the applications, by the theory, by the algorithms, by the nice colleagues in the field, and so on. And I do not talk a lot about Google Scholar with my, let's say, PhD students, or I never talk about Google Scholar with my students that are not yet PhD students. They do not even know that this exists, I guess. And that's better. So,
right,
yes.
right. Yeah, because I see that some students, they're looking for all possible ways to increase their number of citations. And even that, in their early career, they're trying to write, those systematic reviews, surveys, even without having enough knowledge about the field itself, and because they know, this will lead me to citation, so they're very keen to do this type of things. And I don't think that is a way. Maybe I think you should do things.
That's the wrong way. This will also not propel the field. Usually, this will not be a paper that will be important. So, I mean, if you love your field, if you are motivated, if you work hard on it just because you are motivated, there will be something nice out of it. There will be a nice result, a nice algorithm. Talk about this algorithm, talk about this result, write a nice paper of it. It should be well written so that people like to read it and then also cite it. And then from time to time, you will get your citation.
Yeah, maybe this is the hard way, but in the long term, it seems more wise probably to do that. Also, Martin, in your Google Scholar profile, now that you're talking about Google Scholar, you included the following areas of interest: mathematics, optimization, operations research, energy, and baking.
Yes.
So based on your Twitter activity, I can confirm that you really enjoy doing the latter. And when did you start, taking baking that seriously? And do you think that had any influence on your high number of followers on Twitter? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, why did I start? I was coming back from a road trip with our VW van through the Normandy and Brittany in France. And I love the baguettes there. And then I came back to Germany. I went to a German baker, and the baguettes are not the same. And I said, why? It can't be so different or so difficult to do. So I try on my own. So this was the birth of my baking history a few years ago. And then I really fell in love with baking. So it's really my kind of meditation that I have besides my day-to-day professional work or life. And I'm still very much into it. Of course, it has its peak when we all worked in home office during the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic is not yet over, but I mean, I'm back in the office these days. And of course, then I cannot bake such large amounts compared to the large amounts that I baked during home office times in the pandemic. But I'm still doing it. I'm still baking. I'm still brewing my own beer and so on. So I love these things, and it's kind of my meditation. And I love to take photos. I mean, photography is also a big hobby of mine, and so I can combine these things a bit. And then, of course, I mean, I like to talk about things that I do. So this is why there are a lot and tons of bread photos on Twitter. And you asked me whether this is also a reason on why I have Twitter followers. I guess so. I don't think that they all only want to read my, hey, there's a new preprint news that I put there as well. I mean, maybe some of them are also interested in my bilevel optimization work, but I think people are interested in that. And I think I know that some students take a look as well. And maybe this is also a nice thing for students. They do not only see, this is this very serious German math professor doing serious things all the time and so on. This might be a stereotype that is partly true, but only partly true. And I think it's a good idea to show younger people, younger students, that there is a human behind. And
that there's more to life than writing papers.
Yeah. So they kind of maybe can connect to what I do, because they also see, this is this math professor who is also this baking nerd, right? And maybe this brings a human part to what the students usually see, which is this serious German math professor and so on. So I think, yes, it helps for Twitter followers, although this is not my purpose. I do not post bread photos in order to get more Twitter followers. But I'm happy to see people that say, well, this looks nice and so on and so forth. This is, of course, cool. Yeah, I like it.
I find it very amusing. It's very nice. I also had the chance to access your website on photography, and the photos are really amazing. It seems that you enjoy long time exposure.
Yes.
Again, when did it start, and can you elaborate more on this hobby of yours?
Yeah, this hobby started a long time ago, maybe 10 to 15 years ago already. So I started to take photos, and then I took a look on, at that time it was Flickr. So Facebook was not yet out there, and Twitter was not yet out there. Maybe it was out there, but I was not a user of it. So I took a look, and I saw, this guy is doing such cool photos. This look, I like this look. And then how is he doing it, or how is she doing it? And then I started to do my research, and I tried out. And it was, I mean, I have no professional education on that. It's just about trial and error. And then I learned that these long-time exposure photographies are really the photos that I like a lot. And this is mostly, except for bread photos, this is mostly what I do in photography, these long-time exposure settings. It creates some kind of a surreal aesthetic atmosphere, and this is often also, or most of the times, in black and white, which I also like a lot in photography. So
I can see one right behind you, one photo.
This one.
Yeah.
This is again a long time exposure. I guess it's from the Northern Sea in Germany. So when you do long time exposures, you like something like seas, because by the long time exposure, the water gets very smooth and like silky and so on. And I like this look a lot.
Yeah, that's just excellent.
Thank you.
That's great, fantastic. So Martin, I was thinking about the intersection between mathematical modeling, baking, and photography. And one thing that came to mind after observing the impeccable way you present them in your papers, social media, and websites is that they all have a certain level of aesthetics, if you will. So I also saw your slides and manuscripts, and they're all carefully prepared and very pleasant to see. So do you see yourself as an artist?
Well, first of all, thanks for the nice words. I take this as a compliment. Do I consider myself as an artist? No, I don't. Honestly, I never thought about it, on whether I am an artist or not. I mean, when it comes to photography, one could ask the question, I agree, but I do it just because it's fun for me, and I like, of course, the aesthetics of the look and feel that the photos have that I take, but No, I wouldn't consider me as an artist. I think I'm an optimizer, and maybe a baker, but not an artist. But I mean, when it comes to this interconnection of these fields, maybe I wouldn't say that it's me being an artist, really not, but it's a level of perfectionism maybe that is the common denominator of the subject that you mentioned. So I'm kind of a perfectionist when it comes to these things. So if we finalize a paper, I'm really the last LaTeX nerd going over the last spacings, etc., and taking care of that this is all perfect in my personal from my personal point of view. And also when it comes maybe to baking, if the crust is not that perfect as I like it, I'm not that happy, and then there is also no photo about it. So maybe it's the common denominator is the level of perfectionism. Maybe this is from time to time also a curse, not always a good thing, but I see what you mean, and thanks for your nice words.
I can only imagine when after you've done all that detailed work in preparing a nice manuscript, statically speaking, and then you receive the proofs later on.
I go crazy. I mean, my colleagues see me running through the floor and shouting out. I hate this part of our business. I have to use this word. I hate it because I spend so much love and work into preparing my preprint version of the paper, and then they simply take the axe and destroy it. And not always, but often enough. Okay, often enough. We all know these situations. We all know this experience, and it's really like that. I'm really, really angry about it. I mean, it's in the end. I mean, this is what stays. It's our articles that we write in the end. So they should look perfect, and the journals.
Yeah, when they split the algorithm into 2 pages and other things. Yeah, I know the feeling. Yeah, that's why I asked you that.
Yeah. I mean, this is this level of perfectionism where it really drives me crazy. And when I send articles to colleagues because they say, "Well, can you send this paper maybe?" I never sent the journal. I never sent the journal version. I always sent the preprint because this is how I like it to be presented and so on. So, this is my LaTeX level of perfectionism that I want to have. Yeah.
I see. Well, Martin, thank you so much for your time. It was fantastic to have this conversation with you. Danke. I'm very grateful.
Gern geschehen. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure for me. So I was very happy when you invited me. So I feel very honored, and I think it's a very great thing that you do here. It's a great podcast, a great YouTube channel. I like it a lot, and please go on with it. And I have one suggestion.
Yes?
There should be an interview with you.
Oh.
I don't know if this is existing. So you should find somebody who's doing an interview with you. Maybe some Jubilee episode. You should be the one that is interviewed, because you're doing a very, very good job here. I like it a lot. I like to listen to it. There are very great episodes. All of them are nice, but some of them are outstanding, really. And please go on. It's great. It's a great job.
Thank you so much. Incidentally, this is the 50th episode. So,
okay. So great. So it's a jubilee.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm very happy it turned out to be a very, very special one. So once again, thank you, Martin. I'm again very grateful, and see you soon. Ciao.
Yeah. Thanks as well. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.